The early morning sunlight was just beginning to filter through the thin hospital curtains when Emily Parker felt the first contraction. It started as a dull pressure across her lower back, but soon intensified to a pain that wrapped around her abdomen like a tightening belt. She sat up quickly, startling her husband, Matt, who had been dozing lightly in the stiff recliner beside her. "I think it's time," she whispered, her face pale. Within 20 minutes, the maternity nurses confirmed she was in active labor. Everything became a blur. Nurses bustled in and out, adjusting machines, checking monitors, and helping her breathe through the increasingly intense waves of pain. Matt held her hand tightly, whispering encouragement through clenched teeth. They had prepared for this day for months: prenatal classes, a packed hospital bag, birth plans taped to the fridge. Yet no amount of preparation could have made Emily feel ready for the overwhelming mix of pain, anticipation, and fear she was experiencing now. After 7 hours of labor and a tense 30-minute push, their son arrived. A healthy, loud, red-faced baby boy with his father's nose and a strong grip that surprised even the nurse. Emily cried uncontrollably, not from pain anymore, but from a sense of release, of triumph, and of raw maternal love that overwhelmed her the moment he was placed on her chest. While Emily was moved to recovery and Matt stepped out to call family, she lay back in the hospital bed, exhausted but euphoric. The world outside her small hospital room had disappeared. Nothing mattered but the tiny, sleeping bundle in the bassinet beside her. She didn't check her phone. She didn't care what time it was. She just drifted in and out of rest, smiling in her sleep. It wasn't until the next morning that she finally picked up her phone, mostly to take a picture of the baby and send it to her sister. She unlocked it and was surprised to find dozens of missed notifications, emails, text messages, and document alerts from DocuSign, a legal document signing app she hadn't used since their mortgage approval a year ago. Confused, she opened the most recent email. Her eyes scanned the subject line: confirmation of property sale, 144 Briarwood Lane. She sat up straighter, heart beginning to race. Her stomach twisted. She tapped on the message, trying to make sense of it. Inside was a formal sales contract listing the address of their home, their full names, and a finalized closing date. Yesterday. Emily blinked, rereading the lines in disbelief. According to the document, their house had been sold. There was even a signature under her name, but she hadn't signed anything. She had been in labor. She immediately opened her bank app, her hands shaking. Nothing. No recent deposit. No alert of any funds being transferred. Nothing about this sale made sense. She texted Matt in a panic, "Call me now. Something is very wrong with the house." Within minutes, Matt was back in the room, slightly disoriented from sleep, but sobering quickly as Emily handed him her phone. He read the email silently, his face going white. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. We didn't sell anything." Emily could barely speak. "It says we closed yesterday, Matt. That the house is no longer ours." He was already dialing the number listed in the email. A receptionist at the real estate office picked up. When Matt asked for clarification, she told him the agent who handled the transaction was out, but confirmed that, yes, the sale had gone through. She even complimented his mother for handling things so efficiently on their behalf. That's when Matt's jaw dropped. "My mother?" he repeated, voice rising. "What the hell are you talking about?" Emily watched as Matt's face hardened with anger and confusion. He hung up without another word and immediately called his mother. She didn't answer. He tried again. Still no answer. On the third attempt, she picked up, cheerful as ever. "Hi, sweetheart. Congratulations on the baby. I was just about to come by. Did you sell our house?" Matt's voice was low and cold. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Linda replied, "Well, I wouldn't say I sold it. I arranged for a better future for your family. That place was falling apart. It's no place to raise a child. Don't worry. Everything's taken care of." "You forged our signatures?" He growled. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I just expedited things. I signed for you because I knew you were too busy with the baby. And I already bought a new place. A lovely 2-bedroom condo in Crest Hill. Close to me, and it's in a much better area." Emily, listening, felt her blood run cold. She snatched the phone from Matt's hand. Linda, you had no right. That was our house. That was my home. Linda's tone didn't waver. Your child is my grandson. He deserves better than creaky floorboards and old siding. I did what any loving grandmother would do. Emily hung up before she could scream. Over the next several hours, everything escalated. Matt made more calls, tried to reach the title company. Emily, exhausted and barely a day into motherhood, was forced to go through her documents and emails, piecing together what Linda had done. The most horrifying detail came when they found a digitally signed power of attorney, completely fabricated, that claimed Emily had authorized Linda to handle the property transaction. It wasn't just betrayal. It was illegal. Emily's thoughts spun out of control. What if the buyer already moved in? What if they'd lost everything? Their nursery, their memories, the first home they had made together. She felt powerless, angry, violated, humiliated, and the emotional toll of the situation combined with postpartum exhaustion was nearly unbearable. She sobbed quietly into her pillow, trying not to disturb the baby. Matt sat beside her, holding her hand, unsure of what to say. For the first time, his trust in his mother was shaken to the core. We'll fix this, he said eventually. I don't care how long it takes. We'll fight this. But as Emily stared at the sleeping baby beside her, she knew that some things, once broken, could never fully return to how they were. What Linda had done was more than outrageous. It was a deliberate act of control that stripped them of their agency, their trust, and their security. And she knew one thing for sure. She would never let that woman near her child again. Matt drove home from the hospital alone that evening, still in disbelief. He couldn't stand being away from Emily and their newborn son for even a few hours, but there were things he needed to check, things that couldn't wait. The house at 144, Briarwood Lane had been their refuge, the place they had painted together, where they argued over backsplash tiles and built IKEA furniture that wobbled until they fixed it. It was theirs, and now, according to a legal document, it belonged to someone else. He parked across the street, afraid of what he might find. The front yard was still the same, untrimmed bushes, a slightly leaning mailbox, but there was a new real estate sign planted near the sidewalk. A bright red soul banner stretched across it. He stared at the sign in silence. It was real. Somehow, in the span of 48 hours, Linda had done this. He walked to the front porch, heart pounding, and tried the key. It still worked. That gave him a flicker of hope. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. The living room, still smelling faintly of baby powder and candles, looked exactly how they'd left it 2 days ago when Emily's contraction started. The bassinet beside the couch, the neatly folded blankets, the suitcase packed for the hospital, all untouched. No one had moved in yet, but the thought that a stranger could walk in at any moment made his stomach churn. He went into the office to check their paperwork. In a labeled folder was the original deed. Both his and Emily's names were clearly printed there. The thought of someone forging a power of attorney to override that felt absurd, cartoonish even, but it had happened. He took pictures of every document, including their mortgage approval, and double-checked the dates. Then, he locked the house again and drove straight to his mother's place. Linda lived in Crest Hill, a wealthier suburb, in a polished condo complex that boasted quiet fountains and gated entry. She greeted him with a glass of wine in hand, wearing a silk robe as if nothing had happened. "Matt," she said with a smile, "I was hoping you'd come by. I ordered takeout from that Thai place you love. You must be starving." Matt stepped inside, his voice tight. "You forged legal documents, Mom." She waved her hand dismissively. "I signed for you, yes, but only because I knew how overwhelmed you both were. It was a kindness. You'll see." Matt clenched his fists. "You sold our house without permission." Linda placed her wine glass down gently, then walked over to the dining table where a thick folder rested. She flipped it open like a realtor giving a pitch. That place wasn't safe for a baby. The wiring was old. The roof needed replacing. And let's be honest, it was small. You two were making do, but it was never ideal. I saw a better option and I acted. "You bought a place?" Matt asked, eyebrows raised. "I did," she said brightly. "A 2-bedroom condo in this building. You'd be just down the hall. I already spoke to the manager. It's perfect. No stairs, 24/7 security, and I even had the nursery painted in sage green. You can move in as soon as the baby is home. Matt's mouth fell open. You thought we'd want to live in the same building as you? After you went behind our backs and sold our home? Linda looked genuinely offended. That tone is unnecessary. I'm your mother. I've done everything for you. You wouldn't even have had that house without my help with the down payment. Matt took a deep breath. You gave us a loan, which we paid back. Every cent. Linda crossed her arms. You're welcome. And if I hadn't stepped in again, your son would be sleeping in a drafty corner of a fixer-upper instead of a luxury condo. One day you'll thank me. Matt turned to leave. We're taking legal action. What you did is criminal. You're overreacting, she called after him. You're just exhausted. Give it a week and you'll see I was right. He didn't respond. Back at the hospital, Emily was trying to stay calm, but her mind was a storm of anxiety. She had spoken to a paralegal that afternoon who confirmed that if someone forged her signature on a power of attorney, it could be challenged in court. But until then, the sale might still stand. The property had already been transferred in the system. The buyer, some local investment company, was likely already planning renovations or putting it up for rent. The thought of someone tearing down their nursery walls to install a home office made her sick. When Matt returned and explained what had happened with his mother, Emily looked at him in stunned silence. She expected us to live down the hall from her? She whispered, holding their son protectively against her chest. She thinks she saved us, Matt muttered. She destroyed us, Emily said quietly. They agreed to start with a lawyer first thing in the morning. Matt's cousin recommended a firm that specialized in real estate disputes and fraud. By midday, they were on a video call with attorney Rachel Kane, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who instantly grasped the severity of the case. Rachel's first question was simple. Who signed the documents, and how? Emily shared screenshots of the forged digital signature and the fake power of attorney document. Rachel leaned in, nodding. This is clear-cut fraud, she said. The only challenge is time. If the buyer has already started to assert their rights, renovation, leasing, anything, it complicates the reversal. But given you're a joint owner and never authorized this, we can fight it. She laid out the next steps. File a formal police report for forgery, challenge the deed transfer through civil court, and issue a cease and desist to the buyer pending litigation. It would be expensive, she warned, but the case was strong. The forged POA alone could be enough to invalidate the sale. Emily didn't even hesitate. Do it, she said. Whatever it costs. The lawyer nodded and promised to begin filings within the day. For the first time since the nightmare began, Emily felt a sliver of control returning. Later that night, when the baby finally fell asleep in the hospital bassinet, Matt pulled a blanket over Emily and sat quietly beside her, phone in hand, scrolling through pictures of the house. I wish I could have protected us better, he said quietly. I should have seen this coming. Emily reached over and held his hand. You trusted your mother. That's not a crime. Matt swallowed hard. I don't think I can anymore. The two sat in silence. A family broken and redefined, not by birth, but by betrayal. What should have been the happiest week of their lives had turned into a legal and emotional war. But as Emily looked at their son's peaceful face, she knew one thing. No matter where they lived, they would rebuild. Not on Linda's terms. Not out of guilt, but because they had each other, and because that baby deserved a home filled with love, not manipulation. She kissed Matt's hand and whispered, "We'll get through this. Together." The baby was only 5 days old when the first letter from the investment firm arrived. Neatly folded, formal, and completely devoid of empathy. It was addressed to Emily and Matt Parker and came from the office of Holden Nash Property Group. The letter stated that, as of June 12th, the property located at 144 Briarwood Lane was under the ownership of Holden Nash, and that any unauthorized occupancy of said premises would be considered a violation of contractual transfer and subject to legal action. It ended with a line that felt like a slap to Emily's face. Please vacate the property within 7 days to avoid escalation. She stared at the words as if they were written in another language. Her house, her son's first crib still in the nursery, her favorite mug still in the kitchen. 7 days? It was impossible. She hadn't even healed from labor. Matt, standing beside her in the lawyer's office, nearly crushed the envelope in his grip. "This is harassment," he hissed. "We're suing them." Rachel Kane nodded calmly. "That's why we've already filed for an emergency injunction. This letter is typical scare tactic. It has no legal weight until the court rules on the sale's legitimacy. They're trying to bluff you into backing down." Emily didn't reply. Her mind was elsewhere. She imagined strangers walking through their home with clipboards and notepads, commenting on how the floors needed polishing or how the walls would need a fresh coat of paint. She imagined someone throwing out the handmade decorations from the nursery. The idea that someone might consider their home a flip opportunity, just a line item on a spreadsheet, made her physically nauseous. The next days passed in a haze of legal calls, baby feedings, and emotional landmines. Emily and Matt split their time between the hospital and Rachel's office, signing affidavits, sending bank records, providing utility bills, everything that could prove their ownership and the fraudulent nature of the sale. Rachel had contacted a handwriting analyst to begin comparing Emily's real signatures to the forged one on the power of attorney. It was a brutal process, but it needed to be done. Meanwhile, Linda had gone silent. No visits, no calls, not even a congratulatory gift for her grandson. It was as if she was waiting for them to admit defeat and move into her shiny condo with open arms. Matt had stopped trying to contact her. Something in him had broken. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the realization that the person he trusted most as a child could harm his own family without remorse. On the 7th day, Matt returned to Briarwood Lane to check if the locks had been changed. They hadn't, but as he pulled into the driveway, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Inside sat a man in a buttoned shirt with a clipboard and camera. A representative from Holden Nash, no doubt. The man didn't get out or approach him, but he took a few photos and made a call on his phone as Matt entered the house. Matt walked through each room, filming everything with his phone. The nursery, still untouched. The kitchen, still with post-it notes Emily had left for him before going into labor. He took detailed shots of every corner, knowing it could become part of their evidence if the case dragged on. Before he left, he found the first photo Emily had framed. A picture from their wedding, standing on the porch of the house, both of them smiling like they just won the world. He slipped it into his coat pocket. That evening, Rachel called with new information. The buyer's lawyer finally responded to the injunction. "They're arguing that your mother-in-law had full authority based on the power of attorney. They're doubling down." Emily leaned back in her chair, exhausted. "Even though it was forged?" "Yes," Rachel replied. "They claim they verified the document and assumed it was legitimate. It's a weak defense, but one that could buy them time in court." "And what does that mean for us?" Rachel hesitated. "It means the hearing is going forward. We need to appear in court next Thursday." The thought of sitting in a courtroom just a week after giving birth was overwhelming. But Emily refused to back down. "We'll be there." The following days were a blur of preparation. Rachel helped them draft a comprehensive timeline. Every conversation with Linda, every email, the house purchase, the labor, the sale documents, the DocuSign notifications. Everything was backed up, cataloged, and submitted to the court. Emily had even asked the hospital to provide her admission and discharge papers to prove her physical inability to sign any documents during the supposed sale date. On the morning of the hearing, Emily wore a loose blouse and maternity jeans. Her body still ached, and she moved slowly, carefully, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Matt pushed the stroller while she held the folder of documents close to her chest. Inside the courtroom, they found Linda seated in the front row with her lawyer, a smug-looking man in an expensive gray suit. Linda looked calm, composed, even proud. She offered them a small, pitying smile, like she was the only adult in the room. When the judge entered, the room settled into silence. Rachel began the case with clarity and fire. She explained the timeline, the forged signature, the unauthorized transaction, and Emily's postpartum state. She provided the judge with side-by-side comparisons of Emily's signature and the forged version. Then she presented the original mortgage deed, the joint ownership clause, and Emily's hospital admission report. It was airtight. The opposing lawyer argued that Linda had only acted in her family's best interest, believing she had consent. He claimed that Holden Nash had no way of knowing the power of attorney was fraudulent, and therefore acted in good faith. The judge listened quietly, taking notes. He asked a few questions, mostly directed at Linda, about her decision-making process. When asked directly whether Emily had ever verbally authorized her to sell the home, Linda replied, no, but she would have, had she not been so emotional. That answer changed everything. The judge's face hardened. He asked her to clarify whether she had received written or spoken permission at any point. When she repeated that she had not, his tone shifted. So, you admit you acted on behalf of another person without consent, using a document that was not lawfully executed? Linda glanced at her attorney, then offered a flimsy, I did what I thought was best. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in favor of Emily and Matt, placing a temporary hold on the property transfer and ordering a forensic review of the power of attorney document. He allowed them to remain in the home and signaled that criminal charges for document fraud could follow pending the investigation. Outside the courthouse, Emily broke down in tears, not from defeat, but from sheer relief. Matt pulled her into his arms. We did it, he whispered. We're not done yet, but we got a judge on our side now. Rachel walked up with a rare smile. That's the first step, and you handled yourself like a pro, Emily. Especially considering... Emily laughed through tears. Considering I gave birth last week? Exactly. That night, they returned to Briarwood Lane with their son. Emily stood in the nursery, breathing in the scent of baby lotion and fresh cotton. She gently laid him in his crib, watching as he curled his tiny fists beside his cheeks. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and violation, felt like a fortress again. Not because it was perfectly safe, not because the legal battle was over, but because they were still standing. And no matter how much Linda tried to control their lives, she would never again control their home. The weeks that followed the hearing were slow, methodical, and nerve-wracking. Although the judge had sided with Emily and Matt by issuing a temporary injunction, the case was far from closed. Rachel Kane, their attorney, emphasized that the next phase would require patience. A forensic handwriting analysis, a criminal fraud investigation, and civil proceedings to nullify the entire property transfer. Emily, recovering from childbirth and juggling sleepless nights with her newborn son, felt like she was living in a fog. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something new, quiet determination. Every morning, Emily checked the mailbox with caution. Every unknown number that called made her stomach tighten. Would it be a notice of appeal? A threat from Holden Nash? A new motion from Linda's attorney? The pressure was constant, but so was her focus. She began documenting everything. Phone calls, text messages, interactions, emotional stress. Rachel told her that a thorough paper trail might help when they argued damages later in court. Matt, meanwhile, took time off work. He hadn't expected to burn through his paternity leave dealing with fraud, legal briefings, and betrayal from his own mother. But if he resented it, he never said so. He supported Emily every step of the way, handling the lawyer coordination, nighttime feedings, and even late-night pacing with the baby in his arms when Emily was too overwhelmed to get out of bed. Then came a knock on the door. It was late afternoon on a rainy Wednesday. Emily was folding laundry in the living room, her son asleep in the bassinet. Matt opened the front door and froze. Linda stood there in a white trench coat, holding a pie in a glass dish as if nothing had ever happened. Her expression was calm, too calm. I just came to see my grandson, she said. Matt didn't move. You need to leave. She raised her eyebrows. This is still my family. No, he said quietly. You made a choice. You sold our house. You signed Emily's name without her consent. You lied to everyone. That's not something we come back from. I was trying to help, she said, her voice hardening. And I stand by that. You're young and naive. One day, you'll see I was right. Emily stepped into the hallway, holding her son in her arms. Her voice was low but clear. You're not welcome here. Linda stared at her, and for the first time, something in her face cracked. Not regret, never that, but shock. As if she hadn't expected to actually be held accountable. So that's it? She asked, her tone suddenly sharp. You're cutting me out of my grandson's life? You did that yourself, Emily said. We don't need your money. We don't need your condo, and we definitely don't need your permission to live our own life. Linda placed the pie down on the porch rail and turned, walking to her car without another word. As the door shut behind her, Emily let out a long breath she didn't know she was holding. Matt wrapped his arms around her from behind and pressed his forehead to her shoulder. "She's never going to admit it," he murmured. "I don't need her to," Emily replied. "I just need her gone." 3 weeks later, the results of the forensic signature analysis came back. The power of attorney was conclusively fraudulent. The court accepted the findings as definitive, and the property transfer was officially nullified. Holt and Nash withdrew from the case to avoid further litigation, and the judge ordered their name to be removed from the property records. Emily and Matt were once again the sole legal owners of 144 Briarwood Lane. It wasn't over, though. Linda had been charged with fraud, and while the prosecutor offered a plea deal in exchange for her confession and full cooperation, she refused to admit guilt. She hired a new attorney and tried to spin the story into a misunderstanding, one rooted in maternal concern, not criminal intent. But the evidence was overwhelming. With no viable defense left, she was eventually convicted of forging legal documents and interfering with property transactions. The sentence was light, probation and a fine, but the real damage was done. Her access to her son and grandson was severed by a restraining order, and her social standing in the community crumbled. Back at home, things slowly returned to normal. Emily and Matt finally threw the welcome home party they had originally planned for their baby. Friends and family gathered in their backyard, bringing flowers, gifts, and casseroles. The house was filled with laughter, music, and baby coos instead of legal papers and fear. One evening, long after the sun had set and the guests had gone, Emily and Matt sat on the porch, the baby sleeping peacefully inside. Matt leaned back in the creaky wooden chair they'd salvaged from the attic and looked at the stars. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think forgiveness was automatic. That no matter how badly someone messed up, if they were family, you had to let them back in." Emily turned her head toward him. "And now? Now I know it's earned. And if it's broken badly enough, it's not our job to fix it." Emily reached over and took his hand. "She didn't just try to steal our house. She tried to rewrite our life. And if we'd let her, we'd still be trapped in her version of it." Matt nodded, but we didn't. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. The porch light flickered gently. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then fell quiet. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, not in exhaustion, but in peace. For the first time since labor, she wasn't looking over her shoulder or bracing for the next blow. They had made it, not just through a court battle, but through something far deeper, a confrontation with control, manipulation, and fear disguised as family. Weeks turned into months. The baby grew, and so did the strength of their little family. Emily returned to her freelance design work, balancing diaper changes with client calls. Matt eventually went back to work part-time, grateful for his understanding employer. They didn't move into a bigger house or take a fancy vacation. They stayed right where they were, repainting the nursery together, planting a small garden in the backyard, and making plans for the future without anyone else's interference. And though the wounds left by Linda's betrayal didn't heal overnight, they began to scar over. Some scars stayed visible, reminding them of how close they came to losing everything. But others faded with time, replaced by memories that mattered more. First smiles, first steps, laughter in the kitchen, quiet nights on the porch. Emily never forgot what Linda had done. She didn't pretend it hadn't happened, but she no longer allowed it to define her family's story. That power had been taken back, by choice, by courage, and by a refusal to let someone else's twisted version of love dictate their lives. The house was still small. The siding still needed repainting. But inside it was warm, safe, and free. And that, Emily thought every time she looked at her son's peaceful face, was more than enough.